The orbital city of Epsilon Prime hung like a silver ring around the pale blue planet of Arlen 5. Its lights shimmered against the endless darkness of space, and ships of all shapes and sizes glided silently between docking stations. The city was alive, humming with the constant chatter of humans and aliens alike. To some, it was a marvel of engineering. To others, it was just another place to pass through. On the outer edge of the orbital ring, a small apartment complex clung to the metal framework like a stubborn vine. Its walls were scratched and faded, but it was home to a dozen souls who wanted quiet, who wanted life to move a little slower than the bustling central city. The building was run by Jarek, a human in his late 40s. He had short, dark hair that was beginning to gray at the edges, and eyes that had seen too many worlds to be surprised by much. He was a quiet man, content to maintain the building, collect rent, and tell stories to anyone who was willing to listen, but rarely did anyone listen. That morning, Jarek was checking the apartment list when he noticed the docking bay was unusually full. Transport ships hummed and landed in succession, disgorging travelers with bright eyes and hurried steps. Jarek adjusted his glasses, as he always did, when the light of the orbital sun reflected sharply off the metal walls. And then he saw her. She stepped out of the docking bay carrying a small, worn suitcase. She was young, probably no older than 20, with shoulder-length hair that caught the light and eyes that seemed to study everything at once. Her uniform was simple, almost like a casual traveler's wear, but there was a calmness about her that made her stand out in the crowd. She paused as if weighing her options, then glanced at a data tablet in her hand. Jarek noticed her pause from the window of the apartment office. "Looks like we might have a visitor," he muttered to himself. The girl walked toward the edge of the orbital ring where the apartment complex stood. Her steps were careful but confident. When she finally reached the building, she looked up at it and smiled faintly. It was not a smile of amusement or joy, but one that hinted at curiosity. Jarek stepped out to greet her. He had seen many travelers in his time, but there was something about her, a quiet steadiness, that made him take notice. "Looking for a room?" he asked, his voice calm and neutral. The girl nodded. "Yes, I was told this is a good place to stay." She set her suitcase down lightly on the landing platform. "You seem like a nice landlord," she said, almost as an afterthought. Jarek blinked. That was not something many people said to him. Most either complained about rent or ignored him entirely. Something about her words made him feel warm. He found himself smiling a little awkwardly. "Well, thank you," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "We have a room available. If you like, you can see it first." She nodded again and followed him inside. The apartment was simple, a small living room, a kitchen that had seen better days, and several rooms down a narrow hallway. The walls were pale, the floors worn, but it had character. Jarek showed her the rooms one by one, pointing out the basics: light, heat, gravity adjustment, and the view of the orbital city. "This one," he said finally, opening a door at the end of the hallway. "It's small, but it's quiet. You'll have your privacy." The girl stepped inside and looked around. She touched the windowsill with a finger as if confirming that this place was real. Then she turned to him. "I'll take it," she said simply. Jarek was surprised. Most people wanted to negotiate, ask questions, or hesitate. She seemed certain. "All right," he said, taking out a small data pad to record the contract. "Name, ID, and payment." She handed over a compact ID device, and Jarek scanned it. The system beeped, verifying her information. Everything checked out. She placed a small deposit into the terminal. "Done," Jarek said. "You're officially a tenant." She smiled faintly again. "Thank you. I'm Lyra," she added, as if introductions had been overlooked in the rush of arrival. "Jarek," he replied, shaking her hand briefly. For a moment, they both just stood there. The orbital city hummed faintly outside the windows, ships passing in silence. There was a quiet in the room that neither had expected, a pause that felt almost deliberate. "Will you come back again?" Jarek asked impulsively. The words caught him by surprise. He didn't know why he said them, but the question felt right. Lyra blinked at him, then smiled. "Maybe," she said softly, "if the city doesn't keep me too busy." That small answer was enough. Jarek felt a flicker of curiosity. Who was this girl, and why did she seem to carry something more than the usual traveler's caution? Over the next few days, Lyra settled into the room. She unpacked a few belongings, a small bag of clothes, a couple of books in an unfamiliar language, and a sleek device that hummed faintly when she activated it. She didn't ask many questions about Jarek at first, only observing quietly, often standing by the window and looking at the orbital city with thoughtful eyes. Jarek, on the other hand, began noticing small things about her. She had a habit of touching objects as if feeling their history. She read human literature and alien journals alike, often comparing notes aloud. Sometimes she would pause mid-step to write something on a floating data pad, as though recording the essence of life itself. He realized she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Most visitors were in a hurry, impatient, or oblivious to the lives around them. Lyra, however, seemed genuinely interested in everything, from the humming machinery of the orbital city to the quiet moments between stars. One evening, the orbital city lit up in a cascade of colors as a massive transport convoy passed by. Lyra came to the balcony and leaned on the railing, her eyes reflecting the lights. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is," Jarek agreed, "but it's also fragile. One miscalculation and this entire city could be in trouble." She nodded, as if considering the fragility of life itself. "I've seen fragile things before," she said. "Things that seemed weak, but survived against all odds." Jarek raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" She looked at him and smiled faintly again. "Yes, humans. You have a way of surviving that surprises even the universe sometimes." Jarek felt a surge of pride. Humans, often underestimated, often overlooked. But here was someone from the vast expanse of space, recognizing that spark he had always believed in, even in quiet moments like this. Over the next week, Lyra explored the orbital city. She visited markets, observed alien technology, and quietly learned human ways. Jarek would sometimes accompany her, partly out of curiosity and partly because he wanted to see the city through her eyes, and every evening they would return to the small apartment. Sometimes they would talk. Sometimes they would just sit in silence. Jarek realized he was beginning to look forward to her presence, and it unnerved him. He was a man used to solitude, but Lyra's quiet energy filled the apartment in a way that felt alive. One morning, as he prepared breakfast, Lyra approached him. "Do you ever get tired of the city?" she asked, watching him pour a cup of synthetic coffee. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it grows on you. You notice the small things, the way lights reflect off the metal, the way people survive day after day. Humans, we have a way of enduring." She smiled. "Enduring, yes, but also surprising. You never know what a human can do until you see them in action." Jarek paused. The words hung in the air. He looked at her and saw a glimmer of something beyond curiosity, a quiet admiration for human spirit, for resilience. And in that moment, he realized that this encounter, this small apartment, and this young woman might mark the beginning of something far larger than either of them could imagine. The orbital city hummed on, indifferent and vast. But inside the small apartment, with its scratched walls and simple furnishings, a spark had been lit. a spark that promised stories, adventures, and challenges that neither Jarek nor Lyra could yet foresee. And for the first time in many years, Jarek felt hope. The orbital city of Epsilon Prime continued to hum with activity. Ships docked, travelers moved through corridors, and the lights of the city reflected on the metallic walls like rivers of stars. Inside the small apartment complex at the edge of the orbital ring, life had begun to settle into a new rhythm, one colored by the quiet presence of Lyra. Jarek had become used to her curious questions. She asked about everything: the way humans engineered their ships, the laws that governed the city, the stories of past explorers who had traveled to unknown planets. Every question was thoughtful, asked with the sort of wonder that made Jarek pause and reflect. Most humans had long forgotten that sense of awe. Lyra seemed to carry it like a lantern. One morning she was in the kitchen, examining the coffee machine that hummed softly as it brewed synthetic coffee. "Humans have an interesting way of making simple things work," she said. "Even something like this, it's clever." Jarek smiled. "We do what we must to survive. Simplicity is often the key. Complexity is dangerous in space." She looked at him, eyes wide. "I can see that. Humans have survived places others would call impossible. Your stories about explorers, I want to know more." And so Jarek began to tell them. He started with tales from his younger days, landing on frozen moons where the atmosphere threatened to tear ships apart, navigating asteroid fields dense enough to crush any vessel that wasn't built for precision, and dealing with alien diplomats whose customs were impossible to understand. He told her how humans improvised solutions, how courage and quick thinking often mattered more than strength or numbers. Lyra listened silently, absorbing every word. She asked questions, sometimes simple, sometimes profound. "How did you know it would work?" she asked once, when he described fixing a broken navigation system with only a few scraps of metal and wiring. Jarek chuckled. "We didn't. We hoped, and we tried. Humans are stubborn. Sometimes that stubbornness saves us." She nodded thoughtfully. "I like that. Humans are stubborn but smart, and brave." Jarek felt a flicker of pride. For so long, he had lived quietly, thinking the galaxy had already written its opinion of humans. Most species underestimated them, assuming humans were weak, impulsive, or unskilled. And yet here was Lyra, an outsider, recognizing the spark that he had always believed in. Over the next few days, their bond grew quietly. Lyra explored the orbital city under Jarek's guidance. They walked through narrow corridors lined with glowing panels, past markets where alien merchants called out their wares in strange languages, and into public squares where humans and aliens mingled in peace. "You know," Lyra said one afternoon as they watched a group of human engineers carefully assemble a transport drone, "I think humans have a way of surviving because you never stop learning. You notice problems and fix them, not just wait for someone else to act." Jarek smiled. "We don't have much choice. Out there in space, you learn quickly or you don't survive. And sometimes, the universe just tests you for no reason at all." Lyra's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I want to see more of that. I want to see humans in action, not just surviving, but thriving." Her words planted a thought in Jarek's mind. Humans had always adapted, always faced challenges that seemed impossible. And yet, in Epsilon Prime, surrounded by aliens and towering machines, it was easy to forget how remarkable they really were. That evening, as they returned to the apartment, Lyra paused at the balcony and looked at the orbital city. Lights blinked like distant stars, and ships glided silently between platforms. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But it feels different from the stories, not as dangerous." Jarek leaned beside her. "Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides quietly, waiting. But yes, it's peaceful now, at least for humans here. Not everyone gets that chance. Lyra nodded. Maybe that's why I'm here, to see what humans can do when they're not just surviving, when they have space to think, to learn, to act. Jarek considered her words. He didn't ask why she was so interested in humans. There was a mystery to her, something he didn't yet understand. But he felt an instinct to guide her, to show her what humans were truly capable of. Over the next week, Lyra and Jarek worked on small projects together. She watched him repair the building's gravity controls, helped him sort through shipments of supplies, and even assisted in minor maintenance of the docking platforms. She was careful, attentive, and surprisingly quick to learn. "You pick things up fast," Jarek noted one afternoon as she adjusted a power conduit with steady hands. "I have to," she said simply. "I want to understand, not just observe. Humans, you're clever, and cleverness comes from practice." Her words struck Jarek. Humans had survived because of cleverness, yes, but also because they shared knowledge, taught one another, and trusted in ingenuity. He realized that even in this small apartment complex, the same principles applied. Survival wasn't just about physical skill. It was about observation, learning, and connection. Lyra seemed fascinated by the simplest of human tools. A lever, a switch, a panel. She would study it, turn it over in her hands, and ask, "Why is it done this way?" Jarek would answer patiently, explaining the history and reasoning behind each design. Sometimes he told her stories of failure, how humans learned the hard way, sometimes losing valuable ships or facing impossible odds. "You never give up," Lyra said one evening as they watched a cargo ship leave the docking bay. "Even when things fail, humans keep trying. That's what makes you strong." Jarek chuckled. "We have no choice. The universe doesn't wait for anyone." Lyra tilted her head. "But you don't just survive, you adapt. That's what fascinates me. Not all species do that." Her fascination wasn't flattering in a simple way. It was inspiring. Jarek began to see his own species differently. Humans were often underestimated, even by themselves. Yet here was an outsider seeing the same qualities he had always known existed: creativity, courage, and resilience. One evening, a minor power outage hit the complex. The lights flickered and a low hum filled the hallways. Residents grumbled quietly. Lyra looked at Jarek, expectant. Jarek went to the control panel and began working. Wires were patched, switches adjusted, and systems rebooted. Lyra watched closely, then offered small suggestions, which Jarek tested carefully. Within minutes, the lights stabilized, and the hum returned to its steady rhythm. "See," Lyra said with a smile, "humans solve problems, even when it looks impossible." Jarek smiled back. "Yes, we do." He realized he was no longer just fixing a building. He was teaching, sharing, and connecting. That night, as the orbital city lights reflected on the windows, Jarek sat quietly. Lyra had gone to her room, but he could sense her presence, watching, learning, absorbing. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond maintaining walls and collecting rent. He was witnessing the spark of admiration, and it reminded him why humans had always mattered. Humans were not just survivors. They were problem solvers, thinkers, and adapters. And through Lyra's eyes, he saw that spirit reflected back, clearer than ever. The quiet hum of Epsilon Prime continued outside. Ships glided past, lights flickered in distant corridors, and somewhere, humans and aliens mingled in daily life. Inside the small apartment, Jarek felt a growing certainty. Humanity had a way of shining, even in the vast emptiness of space, and with Lyra here, observing, learning, and connecting, that light seemed brighter than ever. He wondered what her next steps would be, what other truths she might uncover about humans. And deep down, He hoped she would stay long enough to see just how far the human spirit could reach. Because the galaxy was vast, full of unknowns and dangers, but humans had a way of thriving against impossible odds, and perhaps, with Lyra here to witness it, they would finally get the recognition they deserved. Word count: 1, 3, 10. This part builds on their connection, shows human ingenuity, and keeps the HFY theme alive. Humans are clever, adaptable, and inspiring, even through simple acts of problem-solving and observation. I can now continue Part 3, where the first major challenge appears, raising tension and showing humans in action. Do you want me to write Part 3 next? You said, Part 3. 1,300 words Kaleko, or interesting hunachea, or third-person style malekniha, or simple basic Englishka, or violated free Hona Chai Chat GPT said, absolutely. Here's Part 3, the challenge of your story, written in third-person simple English, violation-free, and around 1,300 words, keeping it engaging and HFY-themed. Part 3, the challenge. The orbital city of Epsilon Prime had always seemed calm, almost timeless, from the small apartment where Jarek and Lyra had grown accustomed to observing it. But peace was rarely permanent in the galaxy, and that morning brought a subtle, unsettling tension that no one could ignore. Jarek was at the control panel, checking energy levels and ship logs, when an alert flashed red on the screen. A minor power fluctuation, he thought at first, until the next warning came. Multiple energy nodes had gone offline in the northern sector. These nodes were critical. They regulated gravity and power for entire sections of the orbital city. Not good, Jarek muttered. He tapped his fingers against the console, running simulations in his mind. A minor disruption could cascade quickly, and if the energy grids failed, parts of the city could become uninhabitable. Lyra appeared behind him, holding her datapad tightly. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice calm but alert. Jarek shook his head. "Some kind of system failure. Could be accidental. But I don't like the pattern." He pointed at the map on the console. 3 nodes went down at almost the same time. That doesn't happen naturally. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. "You think it's sabotage?" Jarek nodded slowly. "It's possible. Someone or something wants to test humans, or maybe to drive us out." He glanced at her, measuring her reaction. "I need to check the northern sector. It won't be easy. If the nodes fail completely, we could lose gravity in several residential blocks." She didn't hesitate. "I'll come with you." Jarek blinked. Most humans would have stayed behind, leaving the dangerous work to the technicians or the city security. But Lyra was different. Her calmness in the face of potential danger reminded him of the stories he had told her, humans who faced impossible odds without flinching. Together they activated their personal transport units and maneuvered toward the northern sector. The orbital city stretched below them like a glittering river of lights, ships passing silently in the void. The usual hum of activity was replaced by a tense quiet. Residents were aware that something was wrong, and whispers of system failure floated in corridors and docking bays. When they arrived at the northern sector, the damage was obvious. Energy panels were offline, wires dangled, and sparks flew from one exposed conduit. The air was tense, charged with the hum of failing systems. Jarek crouched beside a damaged power node. "It looks deliberate," he said, examining the control panel. These connections were cut, not just overloaded. Someone wanted the node to fail. Lyra knelt beside him, her fingers moving quickly over her datapad. She scanned the system, identifying weak points and potential bypasses. "We can reroute the energy temporarily," she said. "It won't be perfect, but it should stabilize the area until the main grid can be repaired." Jarek studied her for a moment. She had the knowledge, the calm, and the courage to act under pressure. It reminded him of every story he had ever told her about humans, problem-solving in impossible situations using ingenuity over brute strength. "Let's do it," he said. For hours, they worked together, rerouting power, patching circuits, and improvising solutions with tools they had on hand. Sparks flew occasionally, and the hum of unstable energy made the air tense, but Lyra never wavered. She suggested small adjustments, predicted problems before they happened, and moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to survive in difficult conditions. Jarek could feel a sense of pride swelling inside him. Humans were underestimated constantly, but here they were, calm, intelligent, and persistent in the face of danger. By the time the first node stabilized, the city's lights flickered back to normal in the affected sectors. Jarek wiped sweat from his brow and looked at Lyra. "You're remarkable," he said simply. She shrugged, smiling faintly. "I've seen humans do remarkable things. I just want to understand how." They worked through the night, moving from one failing node to the next. Other technicians arrived, but Jarek and Lyra led the efforts, coordinating teams, issuing instructions, and ensuring the temporary fixes would hold until the central energy grid could be repaired. By dawn, the crisis was over. The northern sector's energy nodes were stable, gravity was restored, and the orbital city's residents could resume their routines. News of the successful emergency response spread quickly. Aliens and humans alike began to recognize the remarkable effort of the small team who had saved the sector from disaster. Jarek and Lyra returned to the apartment, exhausted but satisfied. Lyra placed her datapad down and looked at the city below. "It's impressive," she said softly. "Humans, you don't just survive. You adapt. You think. You act." Jarek nodded. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. Humans, we don't give up even when the odds are against us. And sometimes the odds are impossible." Lyra smiled faintly. "I can see that now. You've shown me more than I expected. Not just surviving, but thriving." For a moment, they sat in silence. The orbital city shimmered below them, the hum of restored energy a quiet reminder of the crisis that had just passed. But even as they rested, Jarek knew the galaxy would not remain quiet for long. There were always challenges, always tests, and always those who underestimated humans. And yet, with Lyra observing, learning, and connecting, Jarek felt a renewed sense of hope. Humans were clever, adaptable, and brave, and no matter what the universe threw at them, they would find a way to face it. A few days later, as normalcy returned, Lyra approached Jarek in the small office. "Do you ever get tired of fixing things?" she asked, her voice curious. Jarek looked at her, thoughtful. "Sometimes. But fixing things, it reminds me of what humans are capable of. Every challenge is a chance to prove that we are clever, resilient, and adaptable. And sometimes it's more than fixing, it's protecting." Lyra nodded. "I understand. That's why I'm here. I want to see humans in action, not just as individuals, but as a species, to see the way you survive and the way you thrive." Jarek realized she wasn't just observing him. She was observing humanity itself. She was learning, understanding, and documenting the strength of a species that was often underestimated by the rest of the galaxy. "Humans have always been underestimated," he said. "And that's part of our strength. No one expects us to succeed. So we often do." Lyra smiled. "I've seen it now, and I'll make sure others see it too." The orbital city outside continued its quiet hum. Ships glided silently through the void, lights reflected on metallic walls, and life went on. But inside the small apartment, a new understanding had taken root. Humans were more than survivors. They were thinkers, innovators, and protectors. And with Lyra's presence, that truth was no longer hidden from the galaxy. Jarek watched her walk to the balcony, her eyes scanning the city with a thoughtful expression. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Pride not just in his actions, but in his species. Humans had faced challenges before, and they would face many more, and he knew without a doubt that they would rise each time, cleverer, braver, and stronger. The day ended with the city calm again, but the memory of the crisis lingered. Jarek and Lyra sat in the small apartment, quietly discussing systems, improvements, and the lessons learned. Every story, every action, reinforced the same truth. Humans had a spark, a determination, and an ingenuity that set them apart. And somewhere in the galaxy, others were beginning to notice. The orbital city of Epsilon Prime was alive with quiet excitement. Word of the recent energy crisis and its dramatic resolution had spread quickly across the city. Humans and aliens alike talked in hushed tones about the team who had saved the northern sector. In the cafes and markets, whispers of admiration grew louder. Jarek walked down the hallway of the apartment complex, the hum of the city outside echoing faintly against the metal walls. For the first time in years, he noticed the faces of his neighbors. They smiled at him with recognition, some even stopping to offer thanks. Usually he was invisible, a quiet landlord who maintained the building without fanfare. But now, thanks to the recent events, humans were being seen differently. Lyra was beside him, holding her datapad and moving with calm efficiency. "You're getting attention," she said lightly, a small smile on her face. Jarek chuckled. "I suppose so. But it's not about me. It's about what humans can do when the universe pushes them. That's what's important." Lyra nodded. "And that's exactly what I want others to see. Not just your actions, but what they represent." The two of them made their way to the central plaza, where a delegation from the orbital city's council had gathered. Aliens of all shapes and sizes hovered and walked around, curious to meet the humans who had acted so decisively during the crisis. Their leader, a tall being with shimmering skin and multiple eyes, approached Jarek and Lyra. "You have done what many thought impossible," the leader said in a calm, resonant voice. "Humans have shown cleverness and courage that even we did not fully understand. For this, we offer recognition." Jarek inclined his head politely. "We did what we could. Humans have always faced challenges and found ways to survive." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Humans are not just survivors. They innovate, adapt, and protect, and they do it with a spirit that the galaxy should recognize. That is why I brought attention to their efforts." The alien leader studied her carefully. "You speak with understanding. Are you human?" Lyra smiled faintly. "I am human, yes, but I am also here to observe, to see how humans act when challenged, to see what they are truly capable of." The council members murmured among themselves, and it was clear that this revelation had shifted their perception. Humans were no longer seen as a minor or fragile species. They were clever, resourceful, and capable of handling crises that even advanced species found difficult. Over the next few days, the recognition of humans grew. Aliens who had once dismissed human ingenuity began asking questions, seeking guidance, and even requesting demonstrations. Jarek and Lyra were invited to speak at meetings and panels, sharing lessons learned from the recent crisis. Lyra showed them how humans approached problem-solving, not with brute force, but with observation, reasoning, and adaptability. She demonstrated how improvisation and careful planning had saved the northern sector. Jarek added stories of past human explorers, showing how humans survived environments that others had declared uninhabitable. The audience was captivated. Many of them had never considered that humans possessed such determination and cleverness. The presentations were simple but effective, and the message was clear: underestimate humans at your own risk. In the evenings, Jarek and Lyra would return to the small apartment complex. They would discuss what had happened that day, reviewing the lessons and strategies used during the crisis. Lyra's observations grew deeper. "Humans have something that others lack," she said one night, looking out at the city lights. "It's not just intelligence, it's creativity, resilience, and a willingness to act even when the outcome is uncertain. That combination is rare in the galaxy." Jarek nodded. "It is rare, and it's why humans survive where others fail. We don't always have the strongest ships, the most advanced weapons, or the largest fleets, but we have ingenuity, and that ingenuity has kept us alive, against odds that no one else would attempt to face." Lyra smiled. "I've seen it firsthand, and I want the galaxy to see it too. Humans deserve recognition not for arrogance, but for what they contribute: clever solutions, bravery, and the ability to adapt." As the days passed, the recognition extended beyond the city. Other orbital stations and colonies began to take notice. Reports of human actions spread across communications networks. Humans were invited to advisory councils, scientific collaborations, and even diplomatic missions. Jarek, once a quiet landlord at the edge of the orbital ring, found himself at the center of attention. He didn't seek it, but he accepted it as a responsibility. He shared knowledge, trained teams, and demonstrated human problem-solving, and Lyra was always beside him, observing, guiding, and documenting. One afternoon, Lyra approached Jarek with a serious expression. "The galaxy is watching now. Humans are no longer hidden. Their ingenuity, their spirit, it is visible. But that also means others will test them. You and your people will be challenged more often." Jarek thought for a moment. "I know. But humans have always faced challenges, and we've always found ways to overcome them. That's who we are." Lyra nodded. "I hope others see that too, and I hope they respect it." The orbital city, once a quiet hub on the edge of space, had become a symbol. It was a testament to what humans could do, not with weapons or dominance, but with intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Other species began to view humans differently, not as a minor presence, but as a force to be respected. Jarek felt a deep sense of pride. For so long, humans had been underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. But now, through calm observation, clever action, and steady determination, they were being recognized for what they truly were. Lyra had played a crucial role, but Jarek also realized that the recognition was not just about her work or his actions. It was about humanity itself. Humans had always faced impossible odds, adapted to extreme environments, and found solutions where others saw failure. Now, the galaxy had a chance to see it too. As evening fell over the orbital city, Lyra and Jarek stood on the balcony of the apartment complex. The lights of the city reflected in their eyes, and a quiet sense of accomplishment hung between them. "Do you ever get tired of proving yourself?" Lyra asked softly. Jarek shook his head. "No. Humans prove themselves every day, often without realizing it. And sometimes it just takes the right moment or the right observer to notice." Lyra smiled. "I'm glad I'm here for that." Jarek looked at her, thoughtful. "You've changed the way humans are seen here. You've shown the galaxy what we're capable of. That's remarkable." She nodded. "I just want others to see what I've seen. Humans are clever, brave, and resilient. And if they are recognized, maybe they will inspire others as well." For the first time, Jarek realized something profound. Humans had always survived, not because the galaxy favored them, but because they adapted, learned, and acted. Recognition was not the goal. It was a natural consequence of their abilities. And now, with Lyra observing and sharing, the galaxy would understand that humanity was not to be underestimated. In the days that followed, invitations poured in. Humans were asked to advise on engineering projects, to collaborate on exploration missions, and to demonstrate problem-solving techniques that had saved entire colonies. The recognition that began with a small crisis in the northern sector had grown into a movement. Humans were finally seen for what they had always been: clever, brave, and adaptable. Jarek and Lyra continued to guide efforts, quietly but effectively. They worked with other species, demonstrating human ingenuity without arrogance, showing that cooperation and problem-solving could achieve more than force or intimidation. And as the orbital city thrived, so too did the reputation of humans across the stars. One evening, as the lights of the orbital city glimmered below them, Lyra turned to Jarek. "You know," she said, "humans are remarkable, not just in what you do, but in who you are. You inspire even those who watch quietly." Jarek smiled, a little shyly. "Perhaps. But humans inspire because they survive, they adapt. They keep moving forward, no matter what the galaxy throws at them." Lyra's smile widened, and now the galaxy knows it. Jarek looked at the city, the lights, and the movement of ships. He felt a deep sense of pride, not just in himself, but in humanity. For so long, humans had struggled, endured, and faced challenges that others could not imagine. And now, the world, or rather the galaxy, was beginning to see what he had always known. Humans were clever, resilient, and capable of facing the impossible. And perhaps, with recognition finally coming, humans would not only survive, but thrive. The orbital city of Epsilon Prime shimmered under the soft light of its distant sun. Ships glided between docking stations, and the hum of machinery filled the air. Life in the city continued, but something had changed. Humans were no longer overlooked. Their courage, ingenuity, and adaptability had earned them respect across the orbital colonies and beyond. And at the edge of the orbital ring, in the small apartment complex that had seen countless travelers, a quiet moment was about to unfold. Jarek walked through the hallway toward his apartment office. He had been busy for days, meetings with council members, demonstrations for visiting species, and discussions about future projects. Yet today felt different. There was an emptiness in the apartment, a subtle quiet that made him aware of Lyra's absence. She had spent weeks documenting and observing, guiding others to understand humanity. And now it was time for her to continue her mission. He found her standing by the balcony, looking out at the city below. Her small bag rested on the floor beside her, and her expression was calm but thoughtful. She had always carried herself with quiet confidence, but now there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You're leaving," Jarek said softly, stepping beside her. Lyra nodded. "I am. My mission continues, and there are other places where humans need to be observed, where their actions can inspire." Jarek watched the orbital city reflect in her eyes, its lights like rivers of stars. "I suppose I should have expected this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But it still feels sudden." She turned to him, her gaze meeting his. "I wanted to see humans here first, to understand them, and to share what I learned. And I did. The galaxy will see what you are capable of. But I cannot stay forever." Jarek nodded. He thought of all the days they had spent together, the quiet mornings, the late nights fixing systems, the tense hours during the energy crisis when the northern sector had almost failed. He remembered how she had observed humans not just surviving, but thriving, and he realized that her presence had changed him as well. "You've done more than observe," he said. "You've reminded me why humans matter, why our ingenuity, courage, and resilience are worth preserving." Lyra smiled faintly. "I hope to do that. Humans are remarkable, and they need to see themselves reflected in someone who believes in them. I wanted to show that, not just to the galaxy, but to those who often forget." Jarek glanced down at the balcony, at the city below. Humans survive, adapt, and thrive because they never give up. And now, with the recognition they're getting, maybe the galaxy will finally understand. She nodded. Yes, and that understanding will grow. Humans will be respected not because they are the strongest, but because they are clever, adaptable, and brave. That is what truly matters. For a long moment they stood in silence. The city hummed around them, indifferent yet alive, and the bond between observer and observed felt complete. Lyra had witnessed the essence of humanity, and Jarek had been reminded of its power through her eyes. Finally, she spoke. I will return, Jarek. This is not the end. I will continue to observe, to share, and to document. And one day, I hope to see you again. Jarek raised an eyebrow, a faint smile forming. Will you really? She nodded. Yes. Humans are worth seeing again. And you? You reminded me of what humanity can do. Jarek felt a warmth in his chest. For years he had maintained walls, collected rent, and lived quietly, thinking that his role in the galaxy was small. But now, with Lyra's words, he understood that even small actions could have wide effects. Human ingenuity, courage, and thoughtfulness were reflected not just in grand stories, but in quiet moments like these. I'll be here, he said softly, waiting, and when you return, perhaps we can show the galaxy even more. Lyra smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. I look forward to it. The next morning, the docking bay was alive with activity. Lyra's transport ship stood ready, its engines humming gently. She had packed her belongings carefully, leaving only a few personal items behind in the apartment. The city buzzed around her, filled with species who had come to respect humans, not because of fear, but because of admiration. Jarek walked with her to the transport. He felt a sense of pride, not just in the recognition humans had earned, but in what Lyra represented, an observer who believed in humanity's potential. Do you have any final advice for humans? Jarek asked, a playful glint in his eye. Lyra paused, considering. Remember who you are. Clever, adaptable, resilient, and never forget that sometimes the smallest actions, helping a neighbor, fixing a system, teaching someone new, can have effects that reach across the stars. Jarek nodded. I'll remember. And I'll make sure others remember too. She reached out and lightly touched his shoulder. Goodbye, Jarek. And thank you for showing me the best of humans. Goodbye, Lyra, he said. And thank you for reminding me. The transport ship's engines roared softly, and she stepped aboard. The hatch closed, and the ship lifted off, gliding into the stars. Jarek watched until it disappeared into the blackness of space, leaving a trail of light that slowly faded. For a moment, the apartment felt emptier than it had in years. Yet, Jarek didn't feel sad. He felt proud. Humans had earned recognition, and the galaxy was beginning to see their true nature, clever, adaptable, and brave. And somewhere out there, Lyra carried that message, spreading it across the stars. He returned to the balcony, looking down at the city below. The hum of life continued, ships gliding silently, and the lights reflecting on metallic walls. The orbital city was alive, and humans were no longer hidden in the shadows. They were seen, respected, and understood. Jarek thought of the stories he had told Lyra, the explorers who had faced impossible odds, the humans who had survived harsh planets, the quiet acts of ingenuity that had kept colonies alive. And he realized that those stories were not just memories. They were lessons, proof of what humans could achieve. He smiled faintly, a quiet determination in his eyes. Humanity had survived against impossible odds before, and it would survive again. With recognition, understanding, and the belief of observers like Lyra, humans could thrive even more. Later that evening, Jarek sat at his desk, reviewing reports from the city council and messages from other orbital colonies. Humans were being invited to collaborate, advise, and demonstrate their skills. The galaxy was watching, and Jarek felt a sense of responsibility. He thought of Lyra, of her words, and of the promise she had made to return. He imagined the day she would come back and the new challenges they could face together. Humans would continue to thrive, adapt, and inspire, not just for themselves, but for the galaxy. The night deepened, and the orbital city shimmered in quiet brilliance. Jarek leaned back in his chair, looking out at the lights, and felt hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing that humanity, no matter the odds, could shine across the stars. And somewhere beyond the orbit, Lyra continued her journey, carrying the story of humanity into the far reaches of space. She would observe, learn, and share. But she would always remember the quiet apartment on the edge of Epsilon Prime, where she first saw the spark of human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Jarek whispered softly to the empty room, a promise more to himself than anyone else. "I'll be here, and when you return, we'll show the galaxy even more." The orbital city hummed quietly around him. Humans were seen, humans were recognized, and humans would continue to thrive. Because ingenuity, courage, and resilience were not just traits, they were the essence of humanity itself. And in that quiet apartment, at the edge of the stars, that essence shone brighter than ever.